Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's edition of the Gamut Network. I love who we have on today because her story is so amazing and I cannot wait to share it with all of you. It is my great pleasure to welcome Cara to the show. Hi, Cara.
Hi, how are
How
you?
are you? Looking as beautiful as ever.
Thank you so much.
I am so excited to share your story and what you are accomplishing in the world with our audience. Can we please first start with your story because it is really incredibly interesting and a little mind blowing. So please indulge us.
Indulge. Oh, I'm so happy to be with you and see your beautiful face.
Mm.
Um, I, my name is Cara. I was born in India and raised in Canada. And we're a very international family. My parents have actually lived in Shanghai, China since 1996, although the extended Indian family lives across Canada. I live in the United States now in Atlanta, Georgia with my husband, John. And this international theme to my side of the family really has been a theme throughout my entire life. I knew at a very young age that I wanted to commit my life or who I was and what I believed in into helping kids. And throughout school in Canada, I volunteered and got involved with the community and learned about child rights issues and international development and what was going on in developing countries. And I think have that connection to India, of course, I was always interested in topics facing children in India and topics facing women. And as a result, decided at a young age that when I grew up, I wanted to work for the United Nations. And I did. That's a very short, summarized version of "and I did," meaning I asked, what do I need to have to be an eligible candidate to be competitive? And at that time, so I was born in 1976, I'm 43. In the 80s, late 80s, 90s, it was about international experience by doing an academic exchange, volunteer experience. Languages are very important in the United Nations. You need this minimum of fluency in 2 UN languages. And I studied international development, looking at international relations and issues of poverty and economic and social justice in different countries, predominantly developing countries. And after graduating and applying to 57 internships, anything that was international that would take me abroad and get me into this field of humanitarian work, luckily the first of the 57 that I applied to with the United Nations, I finally won it.
Oh my
And
gosh, what an accomplishment. And
thank you.
first of all, the fact that at such a young age, this was so important and became your passion is really astounding. I mean, I laid in bed thinking about being a fashion designer, and you were already trying to help the world. So, I mean, just putting that into context. Wow. Okay. So we get you get this amazing internship.
Got this amazing internship with the United Nations World Food Program in Quito, Ecuador. And it was very funny, actually, because I had done my university academic exchange in Ecuador. So on the application, they ask you, where do you not want to go in the world? And not that I didn't love that experience in the country and I learned to speak Spanish, but I wanted to live closer to my dad and my stepmom who had moved to Shanghai. So I applied to Thailand. But
Mm.
because of the language skills and I already had a network there, they sent me to Ecuador. And it really was one of those serendipitous opportunities because I was only 24, 25 years old. I think I turned 25 in my first year there. I sort of had this approach to my work of, we might as well ask. The worst thing they could do was say no.
Mm.
I was also very bold and loud, and at that age thought the louder I was, the more people would hear of how important the work was. And my second boss with the UN, Peter Gosen, said to me, he said, with time will come a softening of your ways. And it softened up a bit, but the conviction is nonetheless as powerful. But that really was the start to this incredible international career that spanned 10 countries, with the United States not being the 10th and the only developed country. Ecuador, Panama, I went to China for a bit, Angola, Madagascar, Mozambique, Thailand, Haiti after the earthquake, and then I came to the US.
Wow.
And it's just been glorious, full of trials and tribulations, and the most amazing honor to be surrounded by some of the most intelligent and compassionate and dedicated humanitarians. I mean, the agency that I spent the most time with was UNICEF, the United Nations Children's Fund. There's 10,000 staff with UNICEF, and they're phenomenal. And so it's just, lifetime relationships, friendships, loves, romances to last a lifetime. Incredible.
What you have experienced, the majority of us will never have that type of exposure and or experience. So I'm so grateful that you're educating us a bit on how how dedicated and how beautifully rich your life has been through your journey. But your life got a little richer, I suppose, at a certain time. Can you tell us about that?
Sure. I was actually, it was my second country, Panama. I was in my late 20s. And in my spare time when I wasn't working, I was salsa dancing. I love to dance. I've always loved to dance. And I started, and I should note that salsa dancing, there's a lot of mini skirts and high heel shoes. And I started having falls, tripping over whether I was dancing, but then even when I would be walking in the office or outside. And it was always thought, oh, well, I'm walking on cobblestone in 4-inch heels. It's probably my shoes. Or I'm not paying attention. You're not concentrating. Just things that you come up with when you slip, right? We all slip and tumble. But the falls became more frequent. And people would ask, why are you limping? And I didn't notice. I mean, this is like a limp when you have a stub toe. It really was my stepmom. My parents had come to visit me in Panama, and she said, you have to go to the doctor. And as a young professional who didn't have time to take care of herself or
Yeah.
herself, all that mattered was that I was working like a dog and, climbing that corporate ladder and having fun with my friends. But that set off the alarm bells. And took years, because I was misdiagnosed with spinal muscular atrophy. I was misdiagnosed with limb girdle muscular dystrophy, misdiagnosed with multiple sclerosis. The reason it was so hard to find is one of the rarest diseases in the world. And after many surgeries and tests back in Canada, and just the surmountable pressure of thinking, my goodness, I have a whole life ahead of me. I want to get married and have children. I actually left my job and went to Shanghai to be with my parents, where from there, via phone call, I was told that I was diagnosed with a rare type of muscular dystrophy called HIBM, hereditary inclusion body myopathy. And all of this was somewhat of a relief to have an answer after years of not knowing, but it was also absurd, meaning the prognosis of your muscles, all of your skeletal muscles, those that you use for movement from head to toe, are dying at an accelerated rate, they're wasting away. And this is a genetic condition that comes from your mother and your father. I mean, what are the chances? My dad is from India. My birth mother is from London, England. And they met at a party, and had a tryst, fell in love, and ta-da, baby. What are the chances that he would have that mutated gene, she would have that mutated gene, and then the child has a 50% chance of getting the disease?
I'm going to interject for 1 second, because I'm beside myself in that my husband and I have the same exact experience, that Oliver has rigid spine muscular dystrophy, which is also incredibly rare. He's one of 70 cases in the world. And the geneticist that we worked with said that this was as close to impossible as she's ever seen. The gene that mutated it for me also mutated for my husband, and we met and had a baby. And even with that, I had 2 other children, that he was the lucky winner that got it from both of us. But I suppose our story is probably in the fact that we're both of Jewish descent, and the geneticists explained to us that the reality is probably somewhere down the line we're related, which is how this happened. So I tend to joke with my mom, because you do have to find the humor, that I said, see, you wanted me to marry a nice Jewish boy, and now I did. And look what happened. If I had married a nice Irish Catholic, we wouldn't be in this position. But it's just very interesting that you have experience, your family experience a similar aspect that we did. That it's unbelievable that we found each other and married and had a baby.
We know of patients in Los Angeles. There's a very large Persian community, although they're not all Persian. There are patients in Israel, the United Kingdom, Italy, India, Japan. There's a very large community in Japan, about 400 patients. China. Actually, a woman here in Atlanta, an African American woman, contacted me recently saying she has HIBM. So, what does that tell us?
Wow.
That HIBM is in every ethnic group in the world. You can be have two different ethnicities and two different genetic mutations, because our genetic mutations can be unique. My father being of the Indian Thai Malay ethnic group, my mother of the Anglo-Saxon ethnic group, and I got the copy from both parents, which caused HIBM, which makes it incredibly rare. The challenge with that being is, while we do have a dedicated community of scientists, it's not enough. We're a rare orphan disease. To date, there is no approved treatment or cure for HIBM. And obviously, scientists and researchers wanting to be able to publish, needing homogenous groups to do clinical trials, it's focused on a very small group of patients.
Mm.
And so, who knows if we'll have a treatment or cure in my lifetime, but they're doing as much as they can. And I think what's challenging for a lot of patients and families, I can imagine that you and your husband, even though this is of no fault of your own, you feel somewhat responsible for your son. As my parents, my dad is like, I gave this to you. I'm like, you gave me a lot more. Also the gifts that come with living with this impairment, but the disease does lead to complete incapacity and is fatal when it affects your heart and your lungs, your ability to breathe. So
And
it's
where are you how is it currently affecting your body?
currently I am quadriplegic, not to the severest extent of quadriplegia, but severe impairment of my four limbs. I use a power wheelchair. It was affectionately known as Khaleesi. She's beautiful. And but I need assistance. I don't drive any longer. I can walk with great difficulty with Cleopatra. This way, that's Cleopatra, my
Oh my
world.
gosh, I love the names.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
thank you. She's my chariot. I can walk with great difficulty when I have my leg brace on, Lillian. But I don't. It's not safe to walk outside, and I'm just so slow, and it's so painful. I need assistance. I need assistance getting around because we can't afford yet a wheelchair accessible vehicle. Um, Hopefully, when coronavirus is over and I can make some more money, we can afford a vehicle. But I need assistance. It can still do most things alone, but it takes forever and it's hard. Getting dressed, getting out of bed is very difficult. Turning over in bed, I have a wonderful husband who helps me a lot. Getting dressed, we don't have an accessible shower yet, so we did buy this very clunky medical bench that if I am alone in the house, that I will use to get in and out. It's just very difficult because it's a tiny shower. It's a very humbling and eye-opening experience when, as an A-type personality boss, independent career woman who wants to believe that she can do it all no matter what, there are things that I can still do it and do it differently. And yeah, there are just some things I can't do anymore.
But what really want to kind of dig into a little bit, and then I want to make sure that we have time to talk about your amazing speaking career, is how I would imagine, because you're human, that there have been times where you could be like, why me? Why did this happen? Da da da. Has that happened, number one? And number two, how do you get yourself out of those moments?
I don't have the why me. I have the thank goodness it was me and not my
Oh
brother.
wow.
Yeah, and just because I have a lot of resilience. I'm a very resilient person, and that comes from having a very difficult childhood. I grew up, my mother had a drinking problem, and she suffered from depression and anxiety, and the alcoholism was severe, and therefore created a lot of challenges at home. She divorced my father when I was only 4 years old. And so when you're a child, keeping that secret, you're the elder sibling, you build resilience at a very young age to survive. And so that, and then living abroad, far, far away from home. And when you get sick, when you're far, far away from home, I mentioned you had malaria 5 times, I had cholera when I was in Haiti. You build resilience because you have to. But you also build perspective as to how lucky you are, because I have seen people who don't have the basic necessities of life, and I will. It took me also 10 years to become emotionally connected to HIBM. So I think that this why me didn't happen because I was really in denial, despite the fact that I was needing one cane, then one leg brace, then 2 canes and 2 leg braces. It was more fear of being found out, of being suspected of not being able to do my job. I was so afraid to lose this career that I had dreamt of from a young age, that I'd worked so hard for. So it drives in you a very unhealthy, bulldoze through approach to life. And that did catch up with me in my late 30s. The trauma from my childhood, the sort of bulldozing, and not ever getting counseling for this traumatic disease that not only took away physical abilities, but also the chance to have children. There are HIBM patients who are mothers, and they're wonderful mothers. I chose for myself not to have children because by the time that I was in my late 30s, the doctors told me that the disease would progress rapidly in a pregnancy, and that I would lose the ability to walk much faster. And I wasn't ready to give up on my career for that sacrifice. So I made that difficult not to have my own children. I always thought maybe adoption. So I had those, which can be traumatic, very difficult, emotional, internal conflicts. But I'm the type of person who would only share those, maybe until recently, with my 1 or 2 best girlfriends. And until recently, those really strong conversations with my parents. I am incredibly close to my dad and my stepmom. We text every day, morning and night. We have a wonderful, beautiful relationship. So that, I think when I really, really hit me was when a orthopedic therapist, not realizing, the bedside manner can be different, or realizing the impact, or that I hadn't realized, told me, well, technically you're quadriplegic. I wasn't ready for that. I, in the moment, very good at keeping a secret and hiding what's going on internally. I was able to get through the 2 hours of, all those physical tests they do to you. But I bawled, cried for 2 days, deeply, profound, because what does that mean? When you live in a world that is not built for you, in terms of physical spaces, or in terms of people's emotional intelligence, or just the psychosocial engagement with other people who don't know how to deal with people with disabilities, when we are, despite being the largest minority in the world, are stigmatized against and discriminated against every single day. To be quadriplegic, I was like, this is now another of hurdles and barriers that I'm going to have to bash down, through my own wit, because there's very little there. And of course, with support from our community, just to be able to continue with my career and be respected and be treated with dignity and to be paid fairly, equally as my peers who don't have a physical impairment or a disability. So I think that profound, oh my gosh, I'm already tired. It's hard. It's emotionally and physically exhausting. It was also for my family. I feel a lot of the struggle that they feel in their helplessness to stop the disease or slow it down, and they would give anything to do that. And so I feel a lot, how do I tell them? When we're sick, we think we can't tell those who we love, oh, what a burden it would be on them. They wouldn't be able to handle it. We have enough to handle ourselves. And I have been so lucky to have supportive friends and my dad and my stepmom to be able to call and say, this is what I'm going through. Oh, and one thing I should clarify, it's not that I wouldn't call my mother, but my mother committed suicide when I was
Oh
17.
my gosh.
So that's just
Wow. So you really, as you said, have built up so much resiliency from your life that, as you so beautifully said, thank God it was you and not your brother, because maybe he didn't have those same building blocks that you have to get you to where you are today. And first of all, I wanted to thank you so much for your honesty, and you talking about things that are incredibly personal and difficult, I'm sure, to talk about, because I want our audience to understand the impact and the true um, angst that this can cause on so much of your life and extended family and your parents and your career and everything. So thank you so much for your honesty and truthfulness behind that. But I do want to talk about your illustrious speaking career. I know that it's on a pause right now due to Corona, but this too shall pass and you will be back on the circuit. But I think it's amazing what you've accomplished, and I want to make sure that we don't miss that part, and certainly how people can get in touch with you to hear more or have you come and speak at their companies, etc. Because this is what I think humanity needs right now. I mean, as you said, this is, you've been through malaria 5 times, you've had some extensive life experience that this will pass and we will get through to the other side. And I don't want them to miss out on you. So, can you, in our last couple minutes, talk about that, please?
Sure, thank you. Yeah, I speak about different issues: women's rights, international development, child rights. I think one of my favorites though is talking about disability inclusion, and predominantly I speak within the diversity and inclusion space. And it is important because, as being the largest minority, we are the least represented,
Mhm.
whether it's workplace, pop culture, social media, film and television, and in life in general. It's always often when we see a person with a disability, it's about that story, whether it's inspirational porn or it's a story about the impairment itself. It never is just, hey, there's a wife and a husband,
And
and
she's in a wheelchair.
exactly.
Yeah.
I'm waiting to see the rom-com that isn't about the, oh my goodness, she's so lucky he married her, which we've heard it all. I've been very lucky to have the opportunity to speak at the TED Women Conference last December in 2019, which was wonderful. So my TED Talk is online. It's called The Beautiful Balance Between Courage and Fear. And that was a
Everybody go on and watch it, please. It will change your life. Continue.
that was a great opportunity. But I've also had the privilege to speak at Fortune 50 companies, universities, schools, at nonprofits, and I just love it. I love the engagement with diverse groups of people. I love having the opportunity to share the extraordinary life that I've lived working with the United Nations all over the world. Also, I took upon a very daring expedition in 2018 to cross the Grand Canyon, which is being made into a documentary film now, her inescapable brave mission. So the great thing about public speaking, I think, is the opportunity to tell life stories, not only of my own, but many of the very brave women and children with disabilities who I've met all over the world, to try and challenge some of these stigmas and stereotypes that people have about who are people with disabilities and how do they live and what do we do. And I love those moments when the audience will either ask questions or come up to me afterwards and say, gosh, that was so thought provoking. Or really when they say, you know what, me too. I have this, my son has this, my mother had this, we're struggling with this. It's such a wonderful way that we can connect as human beings on such a real level. And these are conversations that we need to have if we want to be successful as a society, in our industries, companies. We talk about corporate cultures and wanting to see employees more engaged. We really have to look at what makes a person diverse in all those facets. And really, one of the things that I love to bring into a conversation, as it's often left out. Living in America, we've had a very robust civil rights movement and a robust LGBTQ movement and robust civil right disability movement that started with Judith Heumann and all the wonderful cast, if you've seen Crip Camp off of Netflix. But really, it needs to now look at a movement of the intersectionality of all of these different groups. You know, I am a woman of Indian and English descent who is of a families, multiple religious minorities in our families, who uses a wheelchair. And so my perspective is unique and different. I think also having someone who that have that intersectionality to be in the limelight, to be on the spotlight. Public speaking is something I love. I love storytelling. I think that's so important. Anyone can get up on a stage and tell a story, but pardon me, like to speak. But are you telling a story that captivates people? And what gift are you giving to the audience? That's something I always hope that I'm giving the gift an audience, or the audience a gift, pardon me, something that they can use.
Well, you certainly have given that today. And you have underscored so much of why I wanted to start this show, because I want these stories, your story, your message, to go out at a time that I think our world needs a little soul filling and rethinking and recalibrating. And you just did that so beautifully today. So thank you so much for joining us. Before we go, I like to ask all of my guests one final question. I am a big believer in a vision board and putting out your hopes, dreams, wishes in front of you at all times that you will accomplish. What would be on your vision board? Top thing.
My book. I'm
Oh,
writing my memoirs. I've just finished my book proposal. And I think that it's not just about the life story, it's about paying tribute to women who have just, inspired me and motivated me and who have really helped me. I don't think that we as human beings can be triumphant on our own. And I
agree with
think
that.
this is a wonderful way to honor those strong, bold, wonderful women in my life.
I love that. I cannot wait for it to hit the stands and for everybody to read it. What is the best way that people can get in touch with you?
Usually social media, LinkedIn, Facebook. I use my maiden name, Cara Yar Khan, YARKHAN. Also my website, which is carayarkhan.com. There's a place at the bottom that you can get in touch with me. I'm always happy to hear from people.
Perfect. So, audience, please connect with this amazing woman. Have her come to your companies. Have her share this unbelievable story with as many people as possible. Cara, thank you so much for joining us today. It was such a soul-filling experience. Thank you for being so open and truthful and just your beautiful self. Thank you. If you would like to be on the Gamut Network, please email us at talent@gamutmanagement.com. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel at the Gamut Network and like us on our social channels at Gamut Management. Thank you again.